Okay. Hello there! You don't know me, but I know you, in ways you never imagined. Most people call me the funniest man ever in the history of the world. My parents, well, they call me Bumblefuck Neanderballs. However, you can refer to me as Bobo. Now, this might be a surprise to you, but I'm 100% right all the time, no matter what. Now knowing this, I direct your attention to Super Meat Boy Forever. You can trust me when I say that this game is absolute pig shit. Team Meat had every opportunity, every idea, every element of hindsight imaginable over a decade of not making games, and yet they somehow managed to create the most soulless, most disappointing game in all of 2020. We obviously saw this coming. Meat Boy as a franchise is somewhat dead. Yes, the original game is still and always will be a cult classic, and much better developers, better than Team Meat anyway, will use it as fuel for their projects. But Team Meat said fuck it, let's ruin our one and only game's legacy, let's make a cash grab that does everything the original game doesn't do. The warning signs were there from the start. Way back in 2013, we got word of a Meat Boy autorunner in the works for mobile devices. Now, this was the time where autorunner games were a hit sensation that everyone was doing. And they were popular because they were mostly on mobile devices that, you know, don't have a lot of buttons on them. And so the precedent was these games required one button to play, and it was perfect. Slowly, though, the mobile game craze sort of faded. Knowing this, Team Meat said, no, don't scrap the project. Don't work on a real sequel, just push it onto consoles, people will love it! I guess in one sentence, I could say that Super Meat Boy Forever is just in the wrong place at the wrong time. If it had come out much earlier, and been something to tie us down till an actual, legitimate sequel came out, well, I could say, well, they tried, and move on. Well, no, this is what we get. If you think I'm exaggerating, you need to understand what this game was supposed to follow up and succeed. The original Meat Boy is, as I said, a timeless cult classic that many people, including myself, still love to this day. The art style is recognizable and charming, harkening back to an era of Newgrounds-styled animation, while also being simplistic enough to be memorable and distinct, and easily hold up today. There are lots of callbacks to old video games while being references still make sense within the story, and there were characters out the ass to play as, and they changed up the style of the gameplay, all while being from other indie games made at the time to give them some much needed representation. And the story was a rather simple one, barring the fact that it was absolute fucking apeshit! What was gonna happen next? I'll never tell. The first Super Meat Boy isn't just a game, it's a celebration, a labor of love. Super Meat Boy Forever, on the other hand, feels ingenuine, and so distasteful, and so out of touch with what the original was. This is like a kid being from a wealthy family and saying, no, Mom and Dad, I don't want to go to college, I want to make YouTube videos for a living. All in all, it's just a pale shadow in the face of what it was supposed to follow up. I would have been totally fine if no sequel was made for Super Meat Boy, because it's just that perfect. But we gotta do a rehash, because that's all anyone can do these days. I could best summarize this in the art style for the game. What happened to all these super distinct styles for all the characters? Now we get copy-pasted palette swapping mince madness and butchering the characters beyond belief. Look at these portraits. They look like they all have a steady diet of toothpaste and tap water. Where's the life in these characters that was once there? Gone. Not to mention everything is so bubbly and vibrant and faker than the paper it was drawn on. Did they get fucking Rebecca Sugar to draw this? What the hell? It's hard to believe that this is the same Meat Boy, and for all intents and purposes, this isn't. I will proceed to call the Meat Boy from this game Bent Boy, because he acts nothing like the real Meat Boy. That moves me neatly along to the story, and moreover the cutscenes. You bet your sweet bippy I'm covering the cutscenes, because they are so heavily promoted and take up literally half the game, no joke. So we have Bent Boy, and I guess I'll call Bandage Girl Mrs. Bent Boy, because they're more copy and pasted than my sense of humor. So Bent Boy and Mrs. Bent Boy have a child named Nugget, and for this review, I'll simply call her Oregano. For realsies, having Oregano, a new character to hinge on the plot, goes against a lot of what the original did. They always kept the roster clean and simplified. There's the boy, there's the girl, there's the villain, and the one-off clone that appears for a hot minute and then dips. No other characters were needed, but since we're running on backup creativity for the time being, we'll settle for the new thing, because we don't know how to use the things we got. Oh yeah, and Bent Boy and Mrs. Bent Boy can't canonically have a kid. Does anyone remember this scene? So then we get Dr. Fetus, who for this instance, I will call him Dr. Do Nothing, because he does nothing the entire game. You see, he's mad because he got a curse from his pet shovel that gives him floating geometry dash hands. And so to break the curse, he breaks up the whitest picnic ever conceived and steals all the oregano. What an asshole. So then Bent Boy and Mrs. Bent Boy must spring into action and save their spice. Just to be clear, the entirety of the story basically mirrors the original to the letter. They try to do the forest again, they try to do the hospital again, they do a weird amalgamation of Salt Factory and Rapture for the 3rd chapter, the 4th chapter is just generic and unappealing, and they mimic the end, only worse. And they also do the funny forest animal bit, except the one in Super Meat Boy took like 20 seconds, and the one in this game takes 10 minutes. It takes the game to a slow crawl to focus on shit that nobody could care less about, because they want to add boo-hoo tugging at the heartstrings moments, because in a story without any real substance, that's the only way to pad it out, don't you know? Anyway, they do Lil Slugger again, then Dr. Fetus pounding at the console thing again, and then they do Chad again, along with the pity cutscene, and everything in between is just mind-numbingly boring and contrived. Also, I hate to go off track, but a lot of the names in this game are just dumb. Like, they're just so try-hard and don't work. Here, I'll give you some examples. The second boss, Manic Manipulator. That's a fucking mouthful, and a dumb mouthful at that. Fucking let's call him Sid. It's sort of a callback to the anagram name for Chad, and it's also based on the id, which is the part of the subconscious that fulfills basic instinctual desires. Alright, next we have Tetanusville. It's like they googled, what is the name of a disease? And they came up upon tetanus, and we're like, yes bro, how about this? Amniocropolis. It's a play on the amnion, the places where fetuses farm. Alright, last one, check this shit out. This big fucking planet thing that makes no sense and shouldn't exist, they call it Omega Alpha. Come on! We all know what it should have been called. Everyone, say it with me now. The Venus Nebula! Damn it, you should be giving me $20. Now let's talk about the actual composition of these cutscenes. They aren't necessarily animated badly, though it's funny to see them cut corners from time to time. But overall, they all play out the same. Bent Boy and Mrs. Bent Boy show up to a location, Dr. Do Nothing gets the thing ready for a fight, the heroes strike a fucking dumb anime pose, and then they get into it. Afterwards, they send Dr. Do Nothing away with him visibly flipping shit, and Oregano's silly misadventures and shenanigans along the way. Aww, it's flipping things off for 20 seconds straight, that's so adorable. All while the heroes are constantly making this dumb fucking shock face, or something like it, while Dr. Do Nothing has a constant scowl that looks painted on. None of the characters show any emotion or take initiative, they just react. Take this in juxtaposition with the original Meat Boy. Characters are constantly showing different expressions, new paradigms are being set, and there are times where Meat Boy is actually taking initiative. The story in the new game is all watered down in comparison, and you could layer almost every cutscene on top of each other and not miss a beat. Easily the worst cutscene in the whole game is around the end. You wanna know how long this shit is? 5 fucking minutes! You could any percent speedrun the original game twice in that time. But there's a little something for everyone here. There's characters bumbling around, sequences that take fucking forever and go nowhere, and the goddamn forest animals, fuck! One of them presses a stupid moron button that absolutely shits everything to fuck. Why is it even there? What's its purpose? Even Dr. Do Nothing is like, yo bro, don't do it! So what the fuck is the point? This game tries to be nonsensical like the original, but in the original's defense, it was actually funny. No event that goes down in the game is funny, and there's no real joke to be found for that matter. It's as dry and calculated as you can surely get. And like I said before, they have these boo-hoo so sad moments that don't tug at my heartstrings, they bash my brain with dumb waves. The running joke that the original game story was so moving and sad is just that, a joke. Cause every sad bit they do is over quickly, and there's a lot of humor to break it up. The first forest animal bit, Brownie dying, then coming back and dying again, all those don't go on for 3 shitting minutes at a time, and that's what makes them work. Here, every single thing is played totally straight, like the forest animals are hyper-focused on, and then there's the scene that makes me cringe every time, with the baby crying cause the dickhead animals get killed, and then there's the part where they totally make it look like they're gonna kill off Bent Boy and Mrs. Bent Boy, with fucking Mrs. Bent Boy looking over at Oregano and saying, go! Like all slow-mo and stupid. And of course, Dr. Do Nothing never really gets his just desserts in the end. He's just like,
that's the most beautiful thing I ever saw. It warms the cockles of my cold blooded heart.
and then he's just back to normal 5 seconds later. And speaking of Dr. Do-Nothing, he's got no real reason for taking oregano. He doesn't try and indoctrinate her or, do anything besides lug her around and abuse her sometimes, which is awesome, do it more. They could have done something really cool with it, like Dr. Do-Nothing is a dick to Bent Boy and Mrs. Bent Boy, only when the baby isn't looking. And they have a sort of small bond that goes into the end of the story, so this scene right here is more deserved. Actually, the funniest thing in this game are the moments where Dr. Do-Nothing takes care of the kid and does everything terribly, like putting it on a leash and at one point giving it a pop and a tablet. Like, that's fucking hilarious. And yet they don't spend 5 minutes showing it. How is this possible? Alright, so now we move on to the actual gameplay of this so-called self-proclaimed self-titled game. It fucking sucks. You run to the right constantly and you have zero control over your character. Take this in contrast with how fucking well Meat Boy controlled in the first game. You were able to wiggle the joystick to stick your landings, and pull back on the joystick so you don't overshoot where you're going to land. In every way, the game was on your side, and it was a matter of getting better and learning how the game controls. The old game was, by all intents and purposes, easy to play and difficult to master. Oh yeah, and all the levels in Forever are fucking randomly generated, so that spits in the face of all the well-crafted levels from the first game. Where the fuck did it all go so wrong? Well, let's hear what Tommy Rafenis has to say. He worked on the original game, so surely he must have a very good reason to be doing things this way.
It's not an auto runner in the way that you think with like a mobile game. Like Runner 3.
Right.
It's more in that vein where it's a full game. Yeah. Where you just don't have to run.
Alright, I guess Tommy never really played Runner 3 because, unlike this piece of fuck, Runner 3 is based around rhythm. All the Bit Trip Runner games are. Plus, that one takes skill to play. Well, let's see what he has to say about that.
A Meat Boy game has a certain connotation to it, a difficult, rewarding platformer kind of thing. The goal here was to make a more accessible Meat Boy game that was easier to play, but still just as difficult.
Okay, I seriously think Tommy has gotten fucking dementia while working on this game, because what makes the original Meat Boy so good is that it relied on how well the player knew how to control the characters. Like I said, it's easy to play and difficult to master. There's a D-pad, jump button, and run button. That's all you need. Also, Meat Boy controlled so well in the air that it was impossible to fuck up where you wanted to go. And if you messed it up somehow, it's because you were a baby fucking unicorn that couldn't play the game right. I was in the same boat as all the limp dicks that think Meat Boy is actually hard, and the game pulls all types of witchcraft shittery to get you to not win. But over time, I practiced, and it became equal parts knowing how the game controls, memorizing how the levels go, and straight up muscle memory with some of the instances of the levels. This game takes all the skill out of being good, it's just good for you. There's 2 buttons and you're constantly going right. No need to thank us! Also, the original game made it feel like it was a punishment to die. In this new game, you literally go back 2 seconds to the beginning of the puzzle and just have to do it again. It's actually so funny, in this interview I'm using, they actually show this. What a fucking joke.
Yeah, like the unintended side effect was it's a game that kind of anybody can play now. My wife never completed the first game.
Oh, that's understandable.
I beat the Dark World left-handed.
Anyone can pick it up and play it. This is a shitty argument because, like I said, you need to actually practice Meat Boy to get good. And that's the case with any game, really. By just making the shit easy as rocks, you rob the game of any and all difficulty it has the potential of having. Take a look at the very last level of the original Meat Boy. Here's what you do. See, you do that, there, you jump up there, you jump through here, you go through here, you jump up these, jump up there, get the key, get back down there, jump on over to this place, look out for the saw blades, do that, and then boom. See? Easy. Now you do it, stupid! Obviously, if I know how the game controls, and how it's going to act, I'll be good at it. I could give this game to, say, my mom, who knows nothing about this game whatsoever, and yeah, she'll be bad at it. If you make it so that everyone is good at the game, no one can improve. We all know you didn't want to make an accessible game out of the goodness of your heart, Tommy. We know it was because you wanted to make it more marketable. Nothing else could describe this better. Now, obviously, I know difficulty is in the eye of the epic gamer, and since I'm not a shriveled up little peanut worm that's more on the right side of the bell curve, I played through Super Meat Boy in under an hour. That's 30 minutes of gameplay and 30 minutes of god-awful cutscenes. Now let's talk bosses. All of these are just disappointment after disappointment. First boss is easy as shit, and you have no control over your character, of course. Second boss, they throw in fucking dodge the laser type shit. Remember Little Horn from the first game? Remember how unbearably bad that boss was? Because it was just sitting there and dodging the attacks until he died? Well, it's the same idea here. Third boss, you jump around awkwardly until you hit these shield things, and the cutscene beforehand makes sure you're not out of the loop either.
Everybody got that?
Fourth boss is my favorite. It's just a ton of Dr. Fetuses, but they do something cool with giving you an uppercut power-up, and you can do a few things with this. You can uppercut to avoid the saws, or you can save it and hit real Dr. Fetus up in the air. The one and only breath of freedom we get in this game, and it's over quicker than it started. Final boss tries to do something else by combining platforming with the actual fight, but again, it's over quicker than it started. Overall, just a minor distraction, whereas bosses in the original game were a turning point in the story and just took a tiny bit of skill to overcome. They also put the bosses as well as the cutscenes up on the official Team Meat YouTube channel. Imagine being this pathetic. But who cares about that? Let's talk about all the indie game characters. Surely Team Meat hasn't lost their touch and included several indie game heroes to better promote them. There was a huge opportunity here to include lots of characters to immortalize the second indie boom of the late 2010s. So let's see who they put in the game. No one. They didn't add a single indie character. Instead, they went the safe route and included all their little OCs, plus some new characters they came up with on the fly just to be able to play as them. What a fucking joke. Not one indie game character made it in. Meat Boy is supposed to be like the supportive older brother that puts his little brother's shitty macaroni drawing on Instagram so lil dipshit Robbie can feel good about himself for once. Fucking prick. Hell, with the way they did the cursed warp zones, they could have recreated the games the characters were from, so you get a bit of a demo for their game. That would have been so fucking cool. But really, they went ahead and said fuck every other indie game out there. Plus the death of Flash. You mean to tell me that they couldn't get a Flash character or two in there to immortalize them in a game for all eternity? Well, I mean, that'd be a shitty way to be remembered, but it's something. So many missed opportunities with this one. It could have been the one saving grace this game had. Instead, this is how Meat Boy dies. Alone. Finally, there's the music, and I've got many a word to say about the music. It is not terrible. Not that good either, but, you know, it's way better than it could have been. For those of you who don't know, Danny B left Team Meat due to creative differences, and they had to find someone to replace him, quick! So they rounded up 3 musicians. They got Ridiculon, made up of 2 guys, one of whom was a longtime friend of Edmund's, and some other guy, I don't know who he is. Then they got Scattle, who was an avid fan of Meat Boy, and an avid composer for indie games, and in every sense, the obvious choice for the job. And finally, they got Lara Shigehara, who did the music for Plants vs. Zombies, but no one really cares about her. It's about these two. They were both tasked with recreating the Danny B tracks. I mean, nothing can replace Danny B. That stuff was just plain perfection. But they had the job of doing so. Scattle did a much better job, I think, while Ridiculon struggled hard to make it work. They tried doing this rock, orchestral, banjo type shit. Like, yeah, when I think Meat Boy, I also immediately think banjo. You know Forest Funk? That first level music that everyone knows? Well, they replaced it with this. All of their tracks were like this. Some of their tracks I did like, but for the most part, they dropped the ball hard. Scattle, on the other hand, did way better at capturing the original feeling of the first soundtrack, lots of drive and lots of energy. I didn't fully subscribe to what he was doing, but that's mainly stylistically speaking. All in all, the energy that Meat Boy should have was there, and it was stronger than ever. Plus, he gave us the best retro theme out of anyone ever, like, even better than the original. So, who do you choose to make the next soundtrack for the next big game in the franchise? 2 guys who did it as a job, and are there because they're friends with Edmund, and didn't have their work received well? Or do you choose the guy who poured his heart and soul into it, is a longtime fan of the franchise, and delivered a better fitting substitute for the original? You think this guy, right? No, bro. You gotta choose the boomers. They're what we need. Understandably, we were all scared that they would be coming back. However, it seemed they really took the time to make themselves better. Some of the tracks have a really good drive to them and fit the levels really well. And funnily enough, there's one track in the album of all things that does not appear in the game that is just 100% perfect. Nothing wrong with it. If you actually bought the album, you know exactly which track I'm talking about. Overall, there aren't as many bops as the other soundtracks, but they're on the right track. God forbid Team Meat comes back and makes another game and brings back Ridiculon. I'll say they'll do a good job. But anyway, that's all I have for you. If you want a really good game with challenging gameplay, amazing looking art, and a charming yet extremely funny story, just buy the original fucking game for $5 cheaper. If it isn't obvious already, this is not the work of Edmund Macmillan. No, he left long ago to ruin another franchise of his. And I'll get to that. Super Bent Boy Forever does the opposite of what a sequel should do. It doesn't innovate, it's not worth the money, it's quite literally a mobile game that got put on consoles. Sure, it looks and sounds the part, but it tries and fails hard in every aspect, having its mobile game skeleton sticking out at every opportunity. Hopefully the characters we all know and love will come back, because Bent Boy is not a good stand-in for the absolute unit that is Meat Boy. To Tommy, Rafinis, and the rest of Team Meat, if you're watching this, remember the roots of Meat Boy and yourselves. Give us the Meat Boy we all remember. Innovative, charming, and awesome. Or you could just buy the merch! Buy the merch! You know you want to.